The universe needed you to slow down so you could hear this. You feel it first as a subtle sinking, not the heavy fatigue of too many late nights, not the kind of exhaustion that a weekend can fix. It is quieter, more precise. Tasks that once sat like small stones in your hands now weigh like river-worn boulders. Conversations loop and fray at the edges. The routines that used to hold shape for you no longer fit. The rhythms feel too tight, the script worn thin. There is a constant background ache, an internal signal that says, this is not yours anymore. This is not ordinary tiredness. Ordinary tiredness has a source you can point to. The long day, the deadline, the sleepless week. You can name it, manage it, rest into it. What you are experiencing is different. It is an unmooring. It is a sense that something inside you is outgrowing the life around it. You wake up in the old roles, the worker, the caregiver, the neat and agreeable version of yourself feel like costumes that no longer sit right. You find yourself withdrawing from small joys without explanation. You notice a lowering of tolerance. Noise, small talk, stale habits that once comforted now scrape. You start to notice the pattern. It's not that the world is harder than before. It's that your interior is changing. The mechanisms that once operated automatically, autopilot beliefs, inherited expectations, reflexive responses, are loosening their grip. That loosening feels precarious. It feels like the ground under your feet giving way. And yet, there is a quality in this unsettlement that is not collapse but initiation. There is a threshold here. What feels like breaking may be the beginning of a realignment. Look for the familiar signs. They come like small, repeated notes, gentle but persistent. You lose interest in things you used to live for. Projects that were once absorbing now feel hollow. The very activities that defined you can feel like empty echoes. You become sensitive to repetition. That phrase someone says at the office, the same pattern in your relationships, the recycled ambitions you keep chasing. Suddenly these loops no longer comfort, they irritate. You feel stuck in déjà vu, as if living the same episode of a show that you memorized long ago. Social encounters drain you more quickly. Crowds that used to energize now flatten you. There is a new sort of discernment. Certain people or places make you feel small, tired, or dulled, and your body warns you to step back, to preserve your interior space. There are moments when you catch yourself performing, smiling where you don't feel like smiling, agreeing when your heart says no. You begin to notice the rehearsed responses, the polite deflection, the automatic reassurance. They no longer land the same way. In their absence, silence grows, and the silence is heavy with possibility and fear at once. You feel tugged at two directions simultaneously.
One part of you wants to keep everything as it is, the schedules, the safety, the familiarity. Another part, deeper and quieter, is calling for a different cadence. Neither side is wholly wrong. Both are aspects of you negotiating. But the pull towards something truer increases, and with it comes a depletion that is not merely physical. It is spiritual fatigue, a particular emptiness that signals an imminent reconfiguration of identity. If any of this lands for you, pause for a moment. Take one slow, deliberate breath. If this message is reaching you, save it or share it with someone who might be in the same place. Hold that breath like a lighthouse beam that steadies you before you go deeper. This is why the metaphor of a matrix feels useful, not as a literal conspiracy or a political claim, but as an image, a woven system of assumptions, roles, and routines that taught you how to be safe and how to belong. The matrix is the architecture of conditioning. It contains the scripts, how success should look, how relationships should run, which parts of you are acceptable to show. It is efficient. It is comforting. It keeps you moving forward with minimal friction. But when your consciousness begins to expand, when something in you starts to sense a mismatch, that architecture itself becomes constrictive. The same structures that once supported you begin to act like a narrow corridor. They do not hold the increasing complexity of who you are becoming. And so the friction begins. You bump up against the rules and feel a dissonance. The more you sense that dissonance, the matrix signals through your body, fatigue, irritability, restlessness, the impulse to withdraw. These are not punishments. They are symptoms of a living system reconfiguring. Think of it as upgrading software on an old machine. The machine must slow down during the install. Files are checked, permissions recalibrated, old routines are paused. The halt feels like a setback in the moment. Nothing appears to work while the system is rearranging itself. You might mistake it for malfunction, for breakdown, but often it's simply necessary reorganization. There is an art to recognizing the difference between breakdown and reformation. The former leaves you disoriented and depleted with no sense of forward movement. The latter, though bewildering, carries an undercurrent of directedness, small, subtle, not always obvious. You notice brief moments of relief that arrive without reason, a sunrise that feels like an opening, a melody that makes you sit very still, an unexpected clarity about a relationship that has long puzzled you. These are not grand miracles. They are breadcrumbs. They are the soft confirmations of a new alignment beginning to take hold. As the old identity loosens, you enter a phase I will call deprogramming. That word can sound harsh, so let me name it gently. It is the slow unwinding of inherited beliefs and automatic behaviors that no longer serve you.
Deprogramming is not a dramatic purge. It's an erosion. A conviction that guided you since childhood loses its tensile strength. A certainty about what you must do to be loved begins to flake away. Habits that once protected you now look like walls that block light. Emotions surge in these moments. Grief, not always loud, sometimes quiet and persistent, for the life you thought you would lead. Anger at the force that taught you to shrink. Fear that you are becoming someone unfamiliar. There is also relief, like a pressure valve releasing. Your interior becomes a weather system, storms of confusion followed by blue patches of surprising calm. This is the emotional texture of deprogramming. Not neat, not linear, but honest. There is a particular vulnerability here. The world will sometimes try to hasten you back into the familiar. Friends, institutions, even your own mind will offer stories to explain the discomfort away. You are tired, you are being dramatic, you just need rest. These explanations are sometimes true in part. Rest will help, sleep helps, but if there is an ongoing undercurrent that refuses to quiet, it is worth listening to without judgment. The invitation is not to abandon rest, but to widen the frame. Rest is necessary but insufficient. The deeper work is decoding which part of you is asking for recalibration. This period is often misread as failing. You think, everyone else is functioning, why am I not? Let me tell you plainly, you are not failing. A system cannot upgrade without a temporary suspension of ordinary function. Imagine a tree in autumn dropping leaves, not because it is dying, but because it is preparing for a different season. The shedding feels like loss, but is in service of future growth. Listen to the subtle evidence of a changing timeline. These confirmations are not flashy. They come in understated ways. You find yourself waking at odd hours with an image that persists. A phrase appears in a dream that refuses to let go. Someone you do not expect reaches out with precisely the kind of question that helps you see your truth. A project you had shelved for years suddenly feels like a thread you can pull. The world, in small ways, rearranges itself to meet the new frequency you are beginning to emit. One of the most steady signs is the sense of inner guidance becoming clearer in moments of stillness, not louder, but clearer. When you slow enough, you can feel a pull, a direction that does not come with a full map. It is more like a magnetic attraction. The image many of us find useful is that of a future self, not a prophecy, not a distant fantasy, but a version of you that has already integrated what you are now learning. That future self is not outside of you. It is a present orientation, like a lodestar that nudges you toward choices that feel truer. Understand this as a felt phenomenon, not as a requirement to renounce reason or to embrace untested beliefs.
The future self language is a map, a metaphor that helps some people recognize inner promptings. For others, the experience arrives as a quiet intuition, a tightening in the chest toward a certain path, an inexplicable calm when considering a particular change. Whatever language you use, the key is the guidance becomes more discernible when you slow down. So let us speak simply about slowing down. The universe needed you to slow down so you could hear this, not because slowing down is a virtue on its own, but because deceleration creates the acoustic conditions for the subtle within you to be audible. When you move at the pace of habit, only loud things register: crises, deadlines, external validations. Slowing down attenuates the noise and amplifies the whisper. It is like tuning your radio to a narrower frequency. Static fades, and the song becomes legible. Here is a micro practice you can apply immediately. You do not have to quit anything, change your life overnight, or make dramatic announcements. Just this. Find a minute. In that minute, sit or stand comfortably. Close your eyes if that is safe for you. Breathe slow, in for 4 counts, out for 6. Let your shoulders soften. As you breathe, notice one sensation in your body without trying to change it. Maybe a tightness at the base of your throat, or a lightness behind your sternum. Name it quietly in your mind. Tension, curiosity, relief. Then ask a gentle question to that sensation. What do you need? Wait for whatever answer comes, even if it is silence. After the minute, carry a single note from that moment forward. A word, a sense, a direction. This exercise is small because big shifts begin with small, consistent acts. Slowing down is not a one-off. It is a practice that trains you to recognize the texture of your own guidance. It creates a series of micro-habits that slowly rewire your attention. Rewiring attention is the core of deprogramming. The matrix depends on your attention to function. When attention is habitually yoked to external approval or reactive comfort, it enacts conditioning. When you begin to direct attention inward, even briefly and imperfectly, you give an opening to a different organization of being. You may meet resistance. Resistance can show up as impatience, as the sense that you are wasting time, as a whisper that urges you back to productivity norms. The cultural pressure to do can be deafening. But notice how your body responds when you choose to slow down. Does your chest unclench? Does your mind allow a little more space? Does an image arise of a life with different proportions? These are the small confirmations that tell you the practice is working, even if nothing external has yet shifted. There will also be moments of confusion that feel like erasure. Habits that once defined you dissolve, and nothing fills the space. Sit with that discomfort without rushing to fill it with old scripts.
The void is not a failure. It is a sacred interval. It is where compost turns into soil. In that interval, new seeds can take root. But seeds require tending. They ask for patience, not force. You may notice that your tastes changes. What you once found nourishing now leaves you flat. Food preferences can shift, as can what you find funny or moving. The places where you spend time feel different. Certain rooms, certain social circles, certain media no longer resonate. It is tempting to interpret these changes as loss. Instead, see them as pruning, a pruning that makes space for new growth. There is a loneliness that accompanies this pruning. It is not the same as isolation you can fix with more social plans. It is a solitude that calls you inward. Many people mistake this loneliness for rejection. They assume they have been left behind. But often, it is an invitation to more honest company with yourself. The loneliness is the necessary clearing where you can begin to hear that quieter voice with more clarity. Do not be alarmed if you experience a blurring of time in this phase. Days may stretch and contract with odd elasticity. Projects that once felt urgent may now feel distant. Decisions may slow down, not because you are indecisive, but because the inner calibration requires more data than the external rush usually allows. Let time soften. Rushing decisions out of fear of what others will think is a sure way to re-implant the old programming. As small confirmations come, hold them gently. Do not expect them to be proof of a complete transformation. Think of them instead as early indicators of a trajectory. A new resonance might make a certain conversation flow differently, or it might make you awake with an image that lingers through the day. Notice these moments and log them inwardly. Over time, they form a pattern that becomes undeniable. There is also a practical edge to this inner work. You do not have to discard all the structures that keep your life functioning. Financial responsibilities, relationships, daily tasks, these remain real and must be tended. The point of slowing down is not to abdicate responsibility, but to recalibrate how you move through responsibilities. Instead of being driven solely by external demands, you begin to filter choices through a slower, wiser center. That center does not dismantle your life, it refines it. At times, the external world will appear unchanged even as your interior shifts. This is normal. The outer life often lags behind the inner realignment. You might continue in the same job, the same home, the same daily schedule for months while feeling dramatically different inside. That discrepancy is disorienting. It can feel dishonest or inauthentic.
Yet often, the most faithful thing you can do in that gap is to practice consistency in small acts of alignment. The minute of breath each day, the refusal to auto-respond to invitations that numb you, the permission to decline a social obligation that drains your energy. These small acts accumulate. I want to speak to a particular fear that may surface now, the fear of losing people. When you change your rhythm, relationships are tested. Some relationships will naturally drift, others will recalibrate and remain. Do not rush to judge either outcome. People love and connect on specific shared frequencies. When your frequency shifts, some bonds will no longer resonate in the same way. This is not an indictment of either party. It is simply the physics of change. Approach these transitions with compassion for yourself and for the other person. Where possible, practice honest conversation. I am in a different season, you might say. I am slowing down to listen. Letting go of certain relational expectations can be as necessary as shedding worn clothes. There will also be an awakening of sensitivity to repetition, to unauthentic patterns that once comforted you. You may find yourself retreating from conversations that recycle the same anxieties. You may stop consuming content that feeds old fears. This new selectivity is part of the pruning. It is not about moral superiority. It is about returning your attention to more nourishing fields. As you move through these stages, pay attention to the small peace moments. They are the compass. A moment of peace might show up as an unexpected smile when thinking about a possible path. It might be the clarity that arrives after a walk. It could be a sunrise that seems to speak directly to you. Keep these moments in a private ledger. They are the evidence of an alternate timeline beginning to crystallize. You may begin to sense a soft prompting to reorient your daily life toward practices that sustain this new cadence. These practices are not prescriptive. They can be as simple as a morning breath, a short walk without headphones, a pause before answering messages, or a journal entry noting one small truth that felt clearer today. The point is not the technique. The point is the slow retraining of attention. These micro-practices are the scaffolding by which the deeper architecture may be built. And yet, even with practices in place, there will be a phase that feels very much like a void. Picture it. You are standing between a doorway you barely remember entering and a room whose shape you cannot yet see. The in-between is porous and strange. It is not a blankness devoid of meaning. It is a charged emptiness pregnant with possibility. You might feel both terrified and excited. You might oscillate between the urge to fill the void with activity and the impulse to sit in it and listen. In that void, the temptation to force clarity can be strong. Our culture prizes answers.
But clarity that is coerced will not be aligned. True clarity often comes like a thaw, slowly, unevenly, and in response to tender tending. This is where patience becomes a spiritual practice. Patience here is not passive waiting, it is active abiding, keeping your attention tuned, cultivating small practices, and allowing the new contours to reveal themselves at their own pace. As you sit in the void, you may receive what feel like small confirmations of the direction you are being pulled toward. A conversation with an old friend that opens in a new, revealing way, an article or a book that lands with uncanny relevance, an image that swims into your mind and stays long after the day has moved on. These confirmations are not guarantees of a specific outcome. They are instead invitations. Look here, consider this, tend this. There will be soft tests along the way. The matrix does not surrender easily. It may attempt to lure you back with offers of what was once valued, promotions, social approval, the safety of busyness. Notice that the old incentives are often loud and immediate. The new whispers are patient and subtle. This contrast can be maddening. You are learning to prefer the whisper over the shout. That preference is a form of fidelity to your inner truth. You might find yourself imagining the future self more vividly as an anchor. Picture that future self not as a distant deity, but as a close friend who has already walked this terrain. What does this version of you look like? How does she breathe? How does he answer difficult questions? Sometimes simply imagining a conversation with this future self can provide a practical nudge. What would you do if you trusted this voice more fully? What small step would feel honest today? The answers are rarely dramatic. They are often modest and surprisingly doable. Here is another small practice to meet that future self. Write a postcard from your future self to you now. Keep it brief. What encouragement does this future version offer? What advice? Notice the tone. Do not censor. This act is not magical. It is a way to externalize a felt possibility, to create a bridge between present uncertainty and a future orientation. Often the most useful guidance will be the kind that asks for one small, sustainable step. There will be moments when the new direction demands recalibration of boundaries. Boundaries are not walls to isolate, but lines that define where your energy flows. You may need to say no more often. You may need to allow silence where there used to be constant noise. Strength in this phase is often tender. It is the ability to protect the interior space where new formation can happen. As you begin to inhabit this slower rhythm more regularly, you will notice shifts in what calls to you. Not everything that once bore the weight of meaning will continue to. That is a kind mercy. The narrowing of appetite frees you to pursue what truly resonates.
And yet, even as you begin to act differently in small ways, uncertainty remains. It is possible that the most disorienting moments are not the dramatic ones, but the long middles, months where the interior has moved, but the exterior waits. These middles test the fidelity of your practice. They ask the question, will you continue to tend the quiet, even when evidence is scarce? The answer to that question will be written in small acts, day after day. This is where courage and tenderness must walk together. Courage to say no to what numbs you. Tenderness to yourself when the old coping mechanisms reassert. Courage to keep listening. Tenderness when the listening surfaces regret or grief. Remember, you were not designed to live every moment in frantic motion. The very mechanisms of renewal require intervals of quiet. The universe, as you experienced in the opening line, needed you to slow down so you could hear. Slowing down is not an escape. It is the condition for discernment. It is how your sensing apparatus returns to a bandwidth where inner guidance becomes intelligible. As the inner voice clarifies, you will begin to notice a new charge, not urgency born of panic, but a forward pull that feels like a kind of gravity toward a more truthful way of living. It often arrives as a soft insistence rather than a roar. It may suggest a direction without telling you the full map. It may invite you to reframe how you measure success, not by external markers, but by the consistency with which your days reflect your values. There is a temptation to demand certainty before moving. That impulse is understandable. We all want guarantees. But deep listening sometimes yields only the next right step, not the entire staircase. Practice taking the next right step from a place of measured confidence rather than performed certainty. This is how momentum grows, not in grand leaps, but in steady, aligned decisions. You might wonder how to discern between a genuine inner pull and an escapist desire disguised as spiritual longing. Here are a few gentle signposts. A true pull tends to be persistent but patient. It invites you toward integration, not dissolution. It usually leads to practices that make you more embodied, not less. It often increases your capacity to care, not diminishes it. An escapist impulse will usually arrive with urgency, promises of immediate relief, and an appetite for avoidance. Discernment here is a practice in itself. Ask, does this choice make me more whole? Does it ask me to be present? Does it honor my commitments as best as possible while inviting authenticity? In the middle of this work, remember to cultivate gratitude for the small confirmations. Gratitude here is not about denial of difficulty. It is about acknowledging the small openings as signs of forward movement. Gratitude tunes you into noticing. It is a kind of soul training that increases perceptual sensitivity. You will likely need supports.
Community matters, but it matters differently now. Seek people who can hold your not knowing with compassion, who can witness without prescribing. Seek friends who can celebrate the small victories and who will be patient in the middles. Professional guides, mentors, coaches, therapists can be companions in the process. The choice of guide is important. Find someone who honors mystery and practices discernment, not someone who sells quick fixes. As you continue, keep your practice small and consistent. An anchor that is gentle and repeatable will serve you better than sporadic intensity. The purpose is to create an internal rhythm that outlasts inspiration. Habits of attention, not grand gestures, will carry the transformation across seasons. There will be days when the old identity tries to reassert with seductive certainty the familiar job title, the familiar role in relationships, the safe but numbing routine. On such days, remember that the refining process is long and often quiet. Do not be surprised if the old identity still holds sway sometimes. Healing is not linear. It is, more often than not, a spiral. You revisit similar themes with deeper clarity each time. At a certain point in this arc, many people experience a sense of a hand extended from their future self, a felt encouragement that says, continue. Not as a demand, but as a recognition. You might hear it as a phrase, feel it as a warmth, or notice it simply as a steadier capacity to choose. When that field feels present, it is helpful to respond with small declarations of intent. These declarations are not spells, they are commitments to orient your attention. They gather your scattered will into a simple, repeatable act. Hold that possibility in your mind for now. There is more to come, deeper descriptions of the sacred void, clearer practices to follow the pull of the future self, and exercises to anchor this transition in daily life. But before we walk further into those territories, I want you to take stock of what has landed, the sensation that this is not ordinary tiredness, the recognition of signs that point to deprogramming, the invitation to slow, and the small practices that begin to tune your inner ear. If you can, sit with what you have noticed about yourself in the past days and weeks. Reflect without judgment. What felt heavy? What felt freeing? What small confirmation surfaced that you could hold on to? Breathe into those answers as if you were giving room for a fragile plant to root. There is a hinge here, a moment between disclosure and action. You are standing with evidence enough to continue intentionally, but the path ahead will require patience and discernment. The voice of the inner guide is becoming audible in the margins. The matrix is loosening. The sacred void waits, not as a threat, but as a threshold.
Soon we will explore how to listen more clearly to that inner orientation, how to distinguish the true pull of your future self from the noise, and what minimal steps will most reliably begin to shift your outer life into closer alignment with your inner truth. For now, remain with this transitional edge. Let the slowing settle into your bones. Let the surface quiet long enough that a more faithful rhythm can reveal itself. Let the slowing settle into your bones. Let the surface quiet long enough that a more faithful rhythm can reveal itself. Now, how do you listen more clearly? How do you separate that persistent whisper of the future self from the noise of habit and obligation? Begin with the simplest of approaches. Reduce the bandwidth of your life so the quieter channels have room to come through. That does not mean dramatic overhaul. It means subtraction. Remove one low-stakes input and notice the change. Turn off a recurring stream of content for a week. Skip one meeting that is polite but pointless. Put your phone in another room for the first 10 minutes of your morning. Each subtraction is an experiment in creating acoustic space. Practice noticing where your attention goes when you are not asked to perform. In those unscheduled moments, set a gentle curiosity. Where does your mind wander when not prodded? What images or themes repeat? Do you feel a tug towards certain people, places, or projects? These tendencies are rarely loud. They are more like the direction of wind across a field. Pay attention to the folder of inclinations that appears when you quiet the performative parts of your day. Here is a listening practice that extends the 1-minute breath. Twice a day, morning and late afternoon, take 3 minutes to sit with a paper and pen. Title the page, Notices. Write stream of consciousness for exactly 3 minutes about what drew your attention during the day. Moments that felt lighter, moments that felt hollow, small phrases that stuck. Do not edit. The ritual of recording has a double effect. It trains perception and it creates evidence. Over weeks, you will see patterns. Patterns are the data of guidance. When a clear nudge arises, treat it as a hypothesis rather than a commandment. Ask, if I follow a small expression of this nudge, what would be a modest, reversible step? The future self rarely asks for immediate, irreversible leaps. She often suggests micro-commitments, a single conversation, a short research thread, an experiment that lasts a month. These steps generate information. They are ways to test whether the pull is for genuine integration or an escape disguised as longing. Make the logic of your next steps kind to your current responsibilities. For example, instead of quitting, you might script a conversation at work that begins with boundary setting. I can take this project on if we adjust the timeline.
Or, instead of abandoning a relationship, Propose a temporary change in weekly expectations that honors both your needs and the other person's. Small renegotiations keep integrity intact and make room for the deeper work to continue. Learn to hold a steady field within yourself when external life demands more speed. One way is to anchor in the breath between activity. Before you answer an email, take a breath and ask, does this require my immediate energy? Before you say yes to a social plan, breathe and name, will this nourish or drain? These micro-pauses are not dramatic. They are the practice of pause itself becoming an ethic. Over time, they shift your default from reflexive expenditure to considered allocation. There will be moments when your inner shift attracts practical complexity. Money, childcare, commuting, elder care, the scaffolding of daily life presses. Use curiosity and creativity rather than urgency. Ask questions. Who can I ask for help in a way that preserves dignity? What tasks can be traded rather than abandoned? Are there small pockets in my schedule that can be repurposed? Practical reconfigurations are rarely glamorous, but they make the interior work sustainable. At a deeper level, cultivate a language to describe what is happening. Name the stages to yourself: noticing, loosening, void, confirmation, small pivot. Names are not prescriptions, they are maps. They help reduce shame by letting you see the pattern rather than inventing personal failings. When you can say, I am in a deprogramming phase, or I am in the sacred void, the state becomes legible and easier to navigate with patience. Discernment is central here, and discernment is learned in community. Seek companions who can hold your question without giving you the answer. Say to a trusted friend, I am sensing a pull, and I want a witness, not a solution. Invite them to notice patterns with you and to ask clarifying questions such as, what do you want more of? Or what would make this smaller? When you invite non-prescriptive feedback, you build a reflective mirror rather than an echo chamber. There is wisdom in having a structured companion, a coach, a mentor, a therapist, or a seasoned friend who values slow work. Choose someone who does not idolize action, but who can help translate subtle directives into practical experiments. Avoid guides who sell certainty and fast fixes. A good guide will help you map out modest, repeatable steps and will resist the urge to produce immediate outcomes. Honor the role of tender boundaries. Saying no is not rejection, it is a form of stewardship. Start with easy no's and allow them to strengthen you for the harder ones. Each no is a reallocation of energy. Notice how your body responds when you protect your time. Often there is a release in the chest, a recalibration of breath, a sense that your attention has found a friend. Use that somatic feedback as data. Care for grief with intention.
The losses you meet in deprogramming are real. They deserve ritual. You might write a goodbye letter to an old identity. Describe what it gave you, what it protected, and what it cost. Burn or store the letter in a box. The formality helps. Or invent a small rite, a music playlist that holds the person you were, played once to honor, then closed. Grief that is witnessed and tended empties with more ease than grief buried beneath productivity. Be wary of quick spiritual remedies disguised as healing. Some cultural messages will offer dramatic re-identification, new names, new social immediate gratifications, complete abandonment of accountability. These can feel tempting because they promise a fast alignment. Test such offers carefully. Do they ask you to be more embodied? Do they increase your capacity for presence in ordinary life? If not, hold them lightly. Practice noticing time signatures in your life. What activities make time feel rich and expansive? Which ones compress it into anxiety? The practices that enlarge subjective time are often the true allies of your future self. Slow walks, unhurried meals, reading without an agenda, small conversations that linger. Cultivate them as anchor points. As the new rhythm takes hold, you will begin to recognize a different quality of decision-making. Decisions made from the void are flavored by a steadier attention. They are less reactive to praise or panic. Test decisions with a simple internal litmus. Does this choice honor the present body and the modest commitments you already hold? If it does, it is likely aligned. If it demands dissolving essential responsibilities for the sake of novelty, it may be more escape than integration. You will also encounter friction from your old environment. Institutions do not always reorient easily to subtle internal shifts. Learn to be patient with external lack. Where possible, create modest structures to protect your inner cultivation.
a weekly slow morning where you do your breathing practice, a digital Sabbath for a few hours on Sunday, a written boundary for work email after dinner. These are not radical abdications. They are experiments in sustaining an inner tempo against the pull of speed. Keep a ledger of confirmations. Over time, collect the small things that point to alignment, an offhand compliment that reveals a changed posture, an email that opens a door you had not expected, a dream image that resolves a knot. Take each confirmation seriously without elevating it into proof. They are signposts along a path, not guarantees. The ledger trains your nervous system to expect data and to trust incremental evidence. One particularly helpful frame when doubt presses is to ask, what would generosity look like in this moment? Generosity towards yourself, towards the people around you, and towards the unfolding process. Generosity softens urgency and opens curiosity. It allows you to respond rather than react.
Often the pull of the future self is kind. It asks for integration that increases capacity to love and serve, not capacity to withdraw entirely. Keep practical faith with small rituals that anchor you. They can be as ordinary as a cup of tea at sunrise, a 5-minute stretch at midday, a nightly note of 3 things that felt true that day. Ritual does not need to be ornate to be effective. Its power is in repetition and the signal it sends to your attention. This is a place worth returning to. Expect tests and practice steadiness when they come. The matrix will offer nostalgic comforts, invitations back into busyness, flattering external recognition for the old role, or urgent tasks that feel like they must be attended to exactly as before. When such offers arrive, pause and consult your ledger and your breath. Ask, does accepting this help me align, or does it return me to a prior rhythm? Your answer will not always be simple, but the pause itself cultivates sovereignty. As alignment grows, you may find your imagination rearranging what a faithful life looks like. Pay attention to how you tell your story now. What words do you choose when someone asks, "What do you do?" You might notice shorter answers or longer ones that feel truer. Language changes are gentle proof that identity is loosening from its old scripts. When worry about consequences arises, what if I change and lose stability? Treat the worry as a companion, not a tyrant. Ask it where it learned its certainty and whether that certainty still serves you. Sometimes worry holds practical intelligence about risk. Use it to plan, not to prevent. Create small contingency plans that are realistic and compassionate. Doing so honors both your longing for truth and your responsibilities. Now consider the spiritual dimensions that are often hardest to explain. The sense that time itself is shifting, that some threads are pulling you toward a different field of possibility. Treat such experiences with humility and curiosity. Record them, discuss them with trusted witnesses, and test them through small action. These experiences do not require spectacle, they require translation into daily practice. At a certain point, you will feel ready for an anchor, a simple, repeatable act that marks the inner shift. This is not a spell, it is a commitment device, a phrase you can return to when doubt clouds the view. Choose something that resonates with your experience. It might be, "I slow down to hear my truth." Say it quietly each morning for a week. Write it at the top of your notices pages. Let it be a lodestar that gathers attention. Remember that transformation is not an event, but a long conversation with yourself. There will be seasons of fast noticing and seasons of quiet dwelling. Both are necessary. Honor the seasons with tenderness. When the old identity reasserts, welcome it as material to be tendered rather than a failure to be shamed.
When small confirmations appear, celebrate them modestly and continue. Return now to the simple practices that sustain the listening. Breathe. Notice. Journal. Pause. Boundary. Repeat. Over months, the accumulation of these small acts will create a subtle structural shift in the way you occupy time, energy, and relationship. The world may not rearrange overnight, but your inner compass will become steadier. And with a steadier compass, you will make decisions that feel increasingly congruent. As you move forward, be tender with yourself about the pace. The universe needed you to slow down so you could hear this not as a punitive delay, but as a generous timing. The delay was not against you, it served you. It created the space for a truer voice to emerge. Listen for that voice in the small, ordinary moments. It will not always roar. Most often, it will murmur. Learn its contours. If you feel called, anchor this moment with a simple declaration. You may write it in the comments, say it aloud, or keep it private. Choose what respects your process. If you wish to make it public as a small energetic gesture, write, "I slow down to hear my truth." Know this, slowing down does not mean you are walking away from life. It is how you step more fully into it. The emptiness you meet is not a void to fear, but a fertile interval. The matrix loosens not to leave you adrift, but to allow a more authentic architecture to form. Trust the small confirmations. Keep the practices small and kind. Gather a few companions who will hold the field for you, and return often to breath, to notice, and to the simple declarations that gather attention. The universe needed you to slow down so you could hear this. You have stayed. You have listened. The pull ahead is gentle but real. Move when you are ready, step by small step. The future self that invited you forward will meet you in the ordinary decisions that honor what you are becoming. If you feel called to mark this threshold, write in the comments, "I slow down to hear my truth."